Good morning and welcome, Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com, and this is a Colorado-only show today as Phoenix is closed. They took the long weekend, the radio station in Phoenix, Christmas and New Year's. You know, that's how it is anymore. You know, you can't give everyone a whole week off. But let's throw a long weekend at them. So a Colorado only show. I hope it finds you. Oh man, crazy stuff. Holy smokes! Just from when we got off the air on Thursday. To this morning, I mean, we had that crazy fire up there in Colorado. Our hearts go out to anybody that lost their homes or their businesses in that. And at first, and I don't know, we'll find out. You know, at first they were saying it was a power line thing, and then I saw something late last night. It may have been arson. Could have, or negligence. We don't know that it may have started in a shed, or I don't know, just crazy stories like that. We've got a wild gold market. Gold surged on Friday late, and then came back down this morning, and there's a big article out on the weekend exposing who is short the silver market and exposing. Oh, it's the banks. Oh, go figure. Listen, it's all fine. It's all good. This is all standard operating procedures. And I want to say it was Ted Butler who was showing all the shorts like B of A and Citi, JP Morgan. But that's where they always want. But this is why, you know, we're telling you, make sure you get it done early, because what happens when it finally does break, the amount of shorts that ends up being forced to cover, that's when you have these huge moves. All of a sudden you wake up and you know, silver's up $3, $4, $5 or gold's up $100. And that's because all the shorts got to run for cover. But again, this isn't news. This is how this market, and Jason's learning that as well. This is how these markets work, right, Jason?
That is right. That is right. You don't know for sure on day to day for sure where it's going. And we know with inflation and the Federal Reserve being in control of our monetary system that gold and silver will continue to go up, because let's face it, gold doesn't really go up. It's the dollars going down, and so that's going to continue to happen. But on a day-to-day basis, Joe, it's not as predictable.
You never know. The bond market rising today, and it's kind of interesting. You know, it's back to 1.6. So the bond market is pretty much back to where it was when Jay Powell announced that transitory was dead. It's kind of interesting. If you just tuned in and read the headlines, you're like, oh man, the bond market is. What's going on there? A big move today. But I guess my question was, why was the bond market, why were yields falling after Jay Powell said transitory was dead to begin with? But again, that's just a bunch of bankers playing games. And I saw over the weekend the amount of money left at the Fed on Friday set a new record. It almost got to $2 trillion. And again, all this exemplifies is our point about inflation. Things are going to get a lot worse. There's trillions of dollars still out there, Jason.
That's right, Joe. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit today, I think, too, because there's I got a little historical information of the kinds of things that are going on long term, and then what's going on right now. And you can go off a lot of patterns, Joe, but what's happening specifically now is there's always something different about the trend you're on. You can use history to a certain extent, and then you guys are like, well, what's going to happen with this situation, Joe? And it just looks really bad, and it's like everyone's waiting for the second shoe to drop, right?
Well, how about this one? Citing supply chain issues, amongst other things. IKEA raised prices of its flat pack furniture. So, for those of you that don't know IKEA, they sell really cheap furniture, and you put it together yourself. I'll say this: my wife, we've bought in several different things, kids' bedrooms and things like that, with IKEA, college dorm rooms with IKEA. Jason, this is, and again, remember right before we took off for the New Year's holiday, I was telling you about I forget if it was Procter & Gamble or Kimberly-Clark. I forget the company that was talking about certain items in food going up 20%. IKEA says furniture now they're going to increase the price of their furniture 50%.
It's a lot of money.
50%.
That's a lot of money for cheap furniture, man.
The retailer said it's no longer able to continue to absorb the cost of raw materials, transportation, logistics, labor, right? Go on and on and on. 50%, they said that the cost increases will be felt the most in North America.
Yeah, of course. We've got too much middle class going on here, Joe. Suck it out of them.
And I don't mean to laugh, right? I mean, you don't see that. I mean, you just don't hear about these things. We have something close to home, obviously, our Tahibo tea products, right? They went from $35 to $50. Apparently, IKEA said it's getting a lot worse. We'll be back after the break. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe Jaquin, Jason Walker here on this Monday. Hope you had a great New Year's. We had a little wet one. It was raining at least where I lived, at my house on New Year's Eve. But all in all, a pretty good New Year's Eve for my family. I hope for yours as well. We're talking about IKEA raising prices 50%. And I don't mean to laugh. Of course they are. Of course they are. Lumber was rallied into the close. It closed December at $1,130 per thousand board feet. It is not the all-time high. Now remember, lumber prices hit that high, $1,700 intraday, $1,700 high over the summer. Then, of course, remember, Jay Powell will use that as a transitory example because lumber prices fell to $500. But don't worry, I told you. Well, that's actually how, lumber would trade between $200 and $400. When it hit $1,700, that was the season when high price would be about $400. When it fell back down to $500, lumber should have been under $200, so still more than 2.5 times. But I warned you that there was another big spike coming, Jason, and here it is. They're saying the cost of homes are now going to start rising again as lumber prices, which are supposed to be, and here's the problem right now, lumber prices should be lower because of winter time. But due to supply chain issues and others, lumber prices continuing at the staggering pace here. When you think about, if you're a home builder, as an example, the cost of wood is 6 times higher than what it should be. So let's just say, and I don't know what it'll cost, a small house, let's just say you needed $10,000 of lumber. Now that same amount of lumber, Jason, $60,000.
Yeah, that's going to make it so that home prices really can't drop, even if there is going to be a pullback in the markets. So I mean, that's why inflation with a broken market is a really a double-edged sword, and there's really nowhere to go except for really bad solutions, Joe.
Used car prices just hit a number I can't even believe. This is coming out. I want to U.S. News reporting the average price for a used car, $29,000. That used to be the price of a new car, average new car price like 5 years ago. Now the average used car price, $29,000. They were talking about how people just finding a car for under 10 grand is going to be difficult to do. You're talking, just start with, if you want a car under 10 grand, I think a good starting point is it's got to be at least 10 years old and probably, Jason, approaching 200,000 miles on it.
Yeah, I've seen information where used car prices are outperforming almost all asset classes out there.
Yeah.
You just bought a whole bunch of used cars in February.
Prices are up 40% from a year or so. Think about IKEA. We're raised prices 50%. Used car prices, hey, they're up 40%. Food companies, hey, listen, we're going to raise prices 20%. I mean, all of this seemingly makes a whole lot of sense. They're saying that the government reported inflation at 6.8%. Again, the math not working very well at all. They said that last month the average used vehicle price was 63% of the average of a new vehicle. So again, just tells you how expensive new vehicles are. They're just trying to say, by the way, that that's more expensive than they were before the pandemic. What a used car today, they're saying a car that used to be $8,000 before the pandemic's now $12,000. You can do the math, right? A $12,000 car is going to be $16,000. A $16,000 car is now $22,000. $22,000 car is now $30,000, and so on and so forth. They're saying that the payments, a household would have to take home to buy the average used car between $60,000 to $75,000 before taxes. So you'd either have to, however you want to, if you grossed 75 or netted 60, they're trying to give you before and after tax price. Put it this way: take home pay at your house needs to be $60,000 to buy the average used car now.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe, I bought a few used cars in my time. I with my process serving, my pizza delivery jobs, buying a car was a part of my monthly payment because I would put on 60,000 miles a year. After 3 years, that's 180,000 miles. So if I bought a car with like 30, 40,000 miles, like I buy Corollas, so I factored that in. I can't imagine the price, my budget for buying cars on a monthly basis with that old job, Joe, to get around and do my job. And there's a lot of companies out there that have travel expenses with fleet vehicles and everything. And what are these guys going to do? These food companies have to deliver food, and the trucking companies, I'll bet these 18-wheelers aren't getting any cheaper either, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. By the way, the median pre-tax household income. So they just told you, U.S. News and World Reports. And again, I just want to give you perspective of how it's coming, and it's coming for all of us, this tax that is inflation. They just said, hey, in order for you to buy the average used vehicle, $29,000, you would need to make $75,000 before taxes. The U.S. median pre-tax household income. Now, this is household income. Okay? This isn't per person. This is household. So when we know here in America today, most households, mom and dad are both working. $67,521. So essentially, what they're saying is half of all American households, and actually more than half. And I've got a bad feeling. Why do I get a feeling that the difference between 67.5 and 75,000? Why do I feel like that's a big number? Right? Why do I feel like probably 60%, maybe 65% of all U.S. households can't afford now the median used vehicle price.
Yeah, Joe, and I hear these car prices, and as a kid, I remember it always rings in my head when we hear these car prices. I remember Archie Bunker on an episode of All in the Family saying how he bought his home in New York for $20,000. That's the thing that rings in my head, Joe. It's like
that was the price.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah,
that was the price. The price of the, and again, the average new home, which means the average price is actually a little higher than the median price. In 1970, $25,000.
Yep.
That's it. Heck, a new car was like $3,000. Fast forward 50 years. Fast forward 50 years, and now we're saying, hey, the average used vehicle price, let's round up a little bit because math's easier, $30,000. So 50 years ago, you could buy a brand new car for $3,000. Right? The median new car. Right? Okay? $3,000. Today, the average used vehicle price, $30,000.
Wow, there you go.
That just tells you really what's happening. It didn't happen all at once, but it was little by little by little bit here. Of course, they like to tell you 2%. Let's face it, we're so far away from 2%, it's ridiculous. And how about this? And we talk about gold and silver having an off year last year. Central banks around the world continuing to increase their gold holdings in their foreign exchange reserves, bringing the total to a 31-year high.
I saw the same thing. Yep.
31 years. Right? This is going back, by the way, very interesting. The last time the dollar was this low in reserves. So right now, by the way, the amount of dollars being held by foreign governments to buy stuff, it is at a 25-year low, going back before the euro was even around. It's not at the all-time lows. Right now, the dollar makes up about 59% of foreign reserves. Before the euro, the dollar was at the low point was at about 45%. But it kind of made sense, right? Because you had so many euro currencies out there. The euro itself kind of lowered your choices. Right, so you had a lot of people, rush into the dollar because they lost a lot of choices. But think about this: when the euro arrived, the dollar was held about 72%, and the euro didn't really come into existence until the late 90s. And so now we're sitting here and we're falling back to a level that we haven't seen since 1995. According to the data out there, the world's central banks haven't held this much gold since 1991, which, by the way, that's the low watermark for the dollar. And why do I got a feeling that's going to continue to be the trend? We're going to continue to see banks add to gold. We're going to see them continuing to turn away from the dollar. Central banks have built up their gold reserves, listen to this, by 4,500 metric tons in just the last decade. And I go back, and Jason, we kind of were talking about, remember when Richard Nixon closed the gold window? Right after World War II, the United States had 20,000 metric tons. By 1971, they had 8,000 metric tons. The problem was the pace of central bank gold buying was really starting to pick up. And when you sit there and we look at this 4,500 metric tons, and you go back 10 years ago, 10 years ago, they were probably only adding, 50 maybe 100 metric tons. The pace, Jason, is starting to quicken.
Yep.
And this is what happened. The pace started off slowly in the 50s. By the time we got into the mid and late 60s, the amount of central bank purchases of gold started to skyrocket, and I've got a feeling this is kind of, we're entering what I think is kind of the mid to late 60s again. I think we're going to see the pace of gold purchases really start to gain steam. And again, they're already at the highest pace that we've seen in 30 years.
I agree, Joe. It's happening. It's been happening for about the last 10 years. I mean, these things take some time, and everyone, I think if you're watching what's going on, something major is getting ready to happen. I got lots of information we could talk about how things are getting ready to happen, and it takes time to get tons of gold into your country. This is a physical holding. This isn't just paper, because paper is coming up for some hard times. I know what the TV says, Joe. Oh, let's go buy stocks. Everyone should just go buy stocks. And that's not really working out for most people, even though the stock market seems to be going up. But Kathy Woods, her, all her stocks are crashing except for two of them. All of them.
She's had a bad year for sure. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break.
Oh, sir. Yes, ma'am. By God be darned.
800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe Jagoin, Jason Walker here, and we're talking about gold and central bank purchases. So let's draw an analogy here. Okay, so remember after the crash and the Great Depression, the closing of the banks in 1933, then we had the revaluation of gold from $20 to $35. Now, here's something very interesting. If you want to believe Ben Bernanke. Okay, so Ben Bernanke, who, after Alan Greenspan retired, he became the head of the Federal Reserve. Him along with Janet Yellen, they gave us two great gifts. They gave us the 2% inflation target, and they also gave us quantitative easing, really three great gifts. The inflation target, quantitative easing, and of course, my favorite, 0% interest rates. Now, why is that important? Because it's important because Ben Bernanke blamed the central bank for the Great Depression. And a lot of them, again, and not, they did cause it, don't get me wrong. It's just not what Ben Bernanke wants you to believe. It really just started with their horribly reckless oversight of the banks, which is obviously something that continues to happen, but neither here nor there. He said it happened because the central bank contracted the money supply. That's what did it. And of course, look at what we have today. Right, a central bank who, money supply be damned, let's just keep printing the living daylights out of it. Everybody knows what's coming. Well, everyone but the average person out on the street, and they hope that they never figure it out. But going back to the Great Depression and why they took away gold. See, gold prevents you from doing what they're doing today. They had amassed the 20,000 metric tons. And it only took them. Well, I guess you had to wait for World War II to be over. But if World War II hadn't been around, I think it would have happened even faster. But almost like the second World War II ended, a lot of these foreign governments were like, you know what, I'll start taking that gold back. In other words, all of a sudden, that $35 wasn't even buying a cow again. Right? So, hey, in 1933, it could buy one cow. Then I woke up, and now it could buy almost two cows. By the time the late 40s rolled around, I was back to barely buying a cow, if that, and they started buying gold again. Now, fast forward, of course, and then Nixon closes the gold window. And no one could trade the treasuries for gold anymore. But then all of a sudden, think about the Alan Greenspan, what I'll call the Maestro era, where through a lot of accounting gimmicks, the United States was able to spend a lot more money but keep it hidden, right? The Social Security Trust Fund and all of these future promises. And so it made things appear better than what they were. And remember, Alan Greenspan told us in the late 90s how we were going to pay off the national debt and do all that stuff. I told that story a lot of times. But during that time, what I'll call the Maestro years of Greenspan, central banks were unloading gold, right? They were just getting rid of it. Right? We don't need this anymore. I mean, remember, England notoriously sold all of its gold. And now, all of a sudden, since really go back to probably about 03 or so, when all of a sudden, 03 or 04, when central banks slowly started buying gold again. And of course, just last year, think about this. Who was it? Thailand, 90 metric tons. India, 70 metric tons. Brazil, 60 metric tons. I mean, countries are buying huge amounts of gold. And the answer really is simple, because they look at the dollar, they look at fiat, and really not just the dollar, right? They're looking at fiat money, Jason, and they're saying, hey, listen, all of a sudden, all of this fiat money doesn't look very sound to us. And they look at what the United States is doing. There's just debt upon debt upon debt upon debt, and I need to have that hedge against what is coming. And these central banks know better than anybody else how bad things are going to get.
They want it this way, Joe. I'm convinced. It always takes me an extra couple hours in front of looking at old information. This is the way they want it, Joe. They want it this way. There was no inflation in this country from the late 1700s to the early 1900s. And when you talked about 1933 and the suspension of gold, something that gets forgotten. If you look at the devaluation of the dollar from 1913, the Federal Reserve's opening, to where it is today, it's pretty much kind of a line that just kind of goes way down to where there's like no value. But there is this one little point. There's a couple of them, but there's one major point where in 1933, the value of the dollar was starting to spike straight upward, Joe. It was going. It was going to do what it's supposed to do, gold-backed money, no inflation. And that's when they got rid of it, Joe, because, hey, that's deflation. If we don't have inflation, we can't steal from people, Joe.
Yeah, you said the word. You were saying deflation.
That's right.
And when you read about Ben Bernanke and the modern central bank, they are more scared of deflation than anything else.
Yep.
Which has led to these horrifically reckless policies, which is why you're seeing all of these nations come back into the gold market. Countries that have never bought gold before buying it. Countries that used to have a lot of gold reacquiring it. Countries that used to store gold in the vaults in New York or England or London or wherever it may be, bringing and repatriating all that gold back home. And again, I think Jason's right. This is exactly how they want it to be. And again, if you don't have that gold put away, you're going to suffer the same fate as everybody else, which is a complete devaluation of your money. We'll be right back. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour. And again, remember, we've seen this pattern before. And like Jason said, you can look to the past for the patterns, but there's always other circumstances that you also need to factor in. So remember the last time around, the central banks flying into the gold markets. Because I know, everyone, it was the inflation of the 70s. Listen, inflation had already started in the 60s. This is why central banks were putting more of their money into gold. And then, of course, Nixon closed the gold window. There's no gold window to close this time. So that's one huge difference. another huge difference. When Nixon closed the gold window, and it's important to remember this, because we're now 51 plus years later, going on year 52. Well, actually, year 51, because he closed the gold window in 1971. Anyway, check my math. The debt, the national debt, was $400 billion. It's now, listen, give or take, okay, a couple pluses and minuses. I know they're going to tell you the national debt right now is right around 30 trillion, just under 30 trillion. But that's not the whole number. Right? Back in 1971, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, I don't even know if it was $10 billion. Okay, it's $9 trillion now,
and going up fast.
Yeah, let's just round it up. It's $40 trillion. So we went from $400 billion, not to $4 trillion, because that would be 10 times. No, 100 times. $40 trillion. So that's a big difference in the variables. When you talk about, debt to GDP, when you talk about how did they finally crush inflation? Inflation didn't get crushed. They give Paul Volcker the credit. Where, a used car loan used to be 25%. Think about if you were getting a used car in 1980, the interest rate was going to be about 25%. Could you imagine what that would cost today at $29,000? It'd be horrible. It would be, you would probably have to have a median income of $150,000 to be able to afford a payment on a used car.
Paul Volcker just bought us a few decades ago. That's what he did. He just bought us a few decades.
We don't have that. We cannot bring interest rates back. Of course, the economy, think about how strong the American economy really was, that it could withstand that interest rate. That interest rate, it's not doable now. If you brought interest rates to, the Fed's funds rate to 20%, just to make the debt payments would probably be, I don't know, we'd probably have a national debt for a year of like $20 trillion. I mean, mathematically, you just can't do it. Which is why when I sit here and I look at, we talked about money supply, right? The increase in the money supply. The world's never seen anything, not even close. The increase in the money supply in 1971 is like a flea farting in the wind compared to what Jay Powell, Janet Yellen, and Ben Bernanke have done since 2006. The increase in the money supply is off the charts. It's why we started the show telling you banks left almost $2 trillion at the Fed. Right, because that's how much excess money there is. This is not a good thing. These are all things of why all of these central banks are going into the gold market the way they are, and you need to be ready for it. I think we're going to see this. The inflation of the 70s is not what we're going to see today, Jason.
Exactly, Joe. And as you were talking about gold in 1933 and gold in the 1960s and 1971, it's kind of a shell game, kind of hiding gold, because the bankers know throughout history that it's when emergencies hit, people run for the gold. And so they've done this really great parlor trick of hiding the gold, moving the gold, because let's face it, in the 1960s, Joe, the European countries were coming for their gold, so they just disconnected it, and then they just sort of slowly dispersed the gold. Who knows where it went? Now you talk about the early 2000s. Okay, now the banks are going to start taking and buy all the gold. But they don't want anyone to get into gold. It's just a big magic trick to hide it. But it's a part of an overall plan. And Joe, this has gone on for centuries. When we get back to the break, I can tell you the world reserve currency usually has about 100 years until they move it to the next country. We are long in the tooth for having the world reserve currency. And I got the years in the different countries, and the central banks really got established in the 1600s, the Rothschilds, and they have just moved this thing from country to country to country. And I really believe if they decide to move it to another country, it will be China, unless it goes straight into the central bank cartel, Joe. But it's going to move to China, and China is making plays to be that economic power, to be the world reserve currency. Where does that leave us? It leaves us, I guess, as England in the 1700s, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We got a couple of items. Since this is a Colorado-only show, these are live. Jason has these in Colorado. We have 11 Mint State 60 Saints. Now, we had these last week. We ran them at 2,060. I'm going to run them today at 2,050. There's 11 of them. You can buy them all. You can buy one. Mint State 60 Saints. $45 less than a ungraded Saint at 2,050. We'll get to the other side, the other item that we have when we return. Don't touch that dial. 800-951-0592. Right now I got gold at 1801. So gold, think about this. When I was here Thursday, gold's down about $8 from when we closed out the show on Thursday. They were 2,060 on Thursday, 2,050. These are 11 graded Mint State 60 Saints at 2,050. I think one time, maybe twice since the coronavirus started, have we sold the 20 for less, which I want us, and never a graded 20. This is the cheapest price for a graded $20 gold piece since before coronavirus. We've got 11 of those at 2,050. We are talking about those ducats last Thursday as well. We've got about 70 ducats still available. And remember the ducats, this is fractional. This is a 1 ducat. It is 0.1107. So think about a 10th ounce American Gold Eagle, which is exactly 1/10 of an ounce of gold. So this is a little over a 1/10 of an ounce on this ducat. A 10th ounce Gold Eagle, $255. These ducats are $225, so that's already saving $30. I need to get rid of them. Anybody who buys 20 or more, and we've got about 70 of them left, I'll take it down to $220. By far the cheapest price for a fractional gold piece, regardless. And the fact that this is going to be like a 10th ounce, it makes it just off the charts good. So we've got the ducats, 225, 20 or more, 220. And then, of course, we've got the 11 MS60 Saints at 2,050, 800-951-0592. And here's the other part. Jason has them, so you can go and get them immediately. Right, Jason?
Absolutely. This will be, I've been having a lot of customers come in the end of last week, and I think I have some more coming in today. Don't think these will last too long, and people are going to, this is the first week of actually working and getting back with the schedule. So people get back to their routines. They'll start coming in here and grabbing all this stuff up, Joe, and it won't last very long. So call the number.
Yeah, all of this stuff came out of an estate. This is part of an estate that we were able to secure. So this is why we're able to offer them at these prices. And like Jason said, it's not going to last. And it's kind of, with Christmas and New Year's and all that, it's one of those interesting times. But a lot of times this is when you can get a great deal like this happening. So the Mint State 60 Saints at 2,050, and of course the Austrian 1 ducat, $225. If you buy 20 or more, $220 at 800-951-0592.